everybody, Adam here from Mento Watches. A few weeks ago, we flew out to Los Angeles, California to host a pop-up vintage watch gathering. Before the event, we were able to meet up with some friends. First up, we got to meet up with our dear friends over at the legendary store WANNABUYAWATCH, owned by our friend Ken Jacobs. Let's take a look. Ken.
Adam.
Thanks for having me. You have my favorite store in Los Angeles. I say that with absolute sincerity. The vibe and the decor here and the watches and everything here is just, this is like, if I were to open a retail store, this is what I'd want it to look like.
Well, if you ever move from Miami to LA,
just take over?
You got a place.
Want to buy a Mento watch?
You got a place. You got a place.
Okay, well, before I go check into my hotel, I figured I'd pop by. So thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Show us some cool watches. Let's start with what's on your wrist. I love that.
So this is a 6238, which is like the unloved stepbrother of all Daytonas.
I don't want to cut you off, but I had in my head right now the bastard stepchild of Daytona.
Yes, of course, of course. Underappreciated, under-recognized, and it's the so-called pre-Daytona, the model before the Daytonas. And I, who love colored dials and interesting dials, sort of like, oh, it's just a two-tone satin dial.
Right.
And I put this on, it's like, holy shit. It is so cool. It is so much more lively and interesting than...
Well, for me, it's from an era of Rolex before the Daytona, so it's very interesting. You have the 6034, the 6234, the 6238, and they made interesting dial variations. It wasn't just Daytona. Once they started with the Daytona, they all kind of looked the same with like minor variations. With the pre-Daytona stuff, you could get wildly different watches, and that's not something you'll see on anybody's wrist any given time. You know, you walk around Los Angeles, you walk around Miami, if you're going to see a vintage watch, it's usually a Submariner or Daytona, but it's a proper Daytona, it's not a pre-Daytona. If you have that on, you know what you're doing, you know? And finding them in good condition is impossible. I can't tell you how many we pass on just because the dial's peeled, the sunburst finish, or it's just missing too much lume, which was a big problem for that watch. So that one looks really nice.
It is.
Yeah.
It is really nice.
All right. You have that listed on your website?
We do.
How much are you guys asking for it?
For just shy of 41.
I mean, listen, you can't get a Daytona for that. You 6239, 6262 start for a nice one at 45 and up, you know, start.
And so, considerably more. This is a beauty. I see, like you said, I've seen bad condition ones, and this is
this one's really nice.
It is a beauty. Absolutely a beauty.
Strong case too.
Yeah. All right, what else?
What else have we got? So tell me, I just want to see what do you like? Forget like what's the most valuable, forget what is the most, you know, for what's the most interesting for you that you would like pick up and wear, you know?
Well, we just sold this morning a gold-filled Elgin, kind of a skyscraper era, 1956. Ronnie M. gave us 3 hearts on it.
Ronnie Budvani?
Yeah.
Shout out to Ronnie Budvani.
Because he's not a snob. It's about style and design and condition, and it was gorgeous.
And that guy could buy whatever he wants. And
absolutely.
You see what he chooses to buy. Follow him on Instagram. Such a fantastic collector because he really goes against the grain and buys what he likes. Truly buys what he likes.
So I acknowledged him when he gave us 3 hearts on this posting of this $775 Elgin. And I said, even a lowly Elgin. And he said when he didn't have a lot of money, he was buying for style and design, and it's about the heart and not about the price tag.
Sure.
And that watch just left here this morning, shortly before you guys deplaned.
So what do you have in your hand there?
So this is another love affair, 1530.
Another interesting era of Rolex.
Of course, which is the quartz case with the automatic movement.
Correct.
Like a 1-year only production model. Oddly enough, even though it's a date just, the dial is marked Oyster Perpetual date. And it's a tiny little niche model. This one has box and papers. It's got nice, gentle patina on the dial.
Another watch that's also very hard to find in good condition. And the biggest problem I see with these, first of all, they're hard enough to find as it is. The last one we had sold like that, is the lume plots are on the re-hot. This is a chapter ring on the bezel, I should say. And all those dots, for some reason, always crumble off. I'm looking at your wrist right now, and it looks like every single one.
No, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And box and papers and nice condition, not all not beat up, not stretched out. I mean, it's super condition.
That's like a true connoisseur's watch for me, because you have to know what it is. Most people look at that and they're like, oh, an oyster quartz, but it's not. It's something so much rarer than that because they used an automatic movement for it. No one really understands why. I think it was like period right before they transitioned into oyster quartz, you know, and used the quartz movements. It's such a weird watch, and you have to really know what it is because they command real money.
Yes,
and what do you guys have this listed?
Box and Papers, 18.5-ish.
It's not bad.
Yeah, super watch.
Fair price. We
Super
sold
watch.
our last one, not quite as nice as this, naked. Yeah, not really as nice as this, with no box and papers for 14.5. So
Yeah, no, you see a lot of in 14.5 or as
Right.
is, and this is super condition and full
Super
set. It's interesting how many people know about it now.
Yeah.
Years ago, you could buy them for $2,500, $3,000. Nobody knew anything about
But
them.
I think that's the great thing about collecting these days too, is that people aren't just so focused on your bread and butter blue chip Daytona. They're looking for something different, you know, and that's why prices have climbed on this. I was actually recently offered one out of Japan from like a wholesaler, and he asked me 13.5 for it watch only, and I'm like, listen, like it's just right on the money there, you know, for me. And the condition wasn't perfect. It was nice. It was okay. It wasn't great. I was like, well, listen, the last one I bought from you was, I think, $10,000. I was trying to negotiate a little bit, but it was
Right.
also true. The last one I
Yes.
paid $10,000 or 10.5. And he's like, yeah, but this is a market that's moving up. And I'm like, what am I supposed to say to that? Okay, well, we know you're super busy. I don't want to keep you here all day because there's so much stuff we can go through, and you have clients coming in and out all day. So thanks for carving out a few minutes. Show us our last watch.
Okay,
Here.
it's hard to narrow it down because I buy for style, design, condition.
I see you wearing that all the time. I know you love that watch.
Well, it's so interesting because it sits in the showcase and nobody pays any attention to it. And I've worn this a few times at shows, and guys grab my wrist and say, "What is that?"
Right.
It is a watch that deserves to be on the wrist because it wears great. I used to hate this model years ago, but
Right.
before I was cool.
You've always been cool. What are you talking about?
And to me, it was the Miami Beach colors, like
Yeah.
the Caribbean blue. And it's like, boo-hoo, we don't like that.
There's a Porsche color, that blue, that's called Miami blue.
But this looks it wears so well. It's so great on the wrist. It's an unfamiliar look. It's distinctive. It's without
Tell
being.
us what it is. So
It's the Lacoltra Polaris 2 Diver's Alarm.
it's from the Mimovox line, right?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Automatic,
So-
1970s.
And I think-
Diver's Alarm, automatic Diver's Alarm with these great colors. Blue Bakelite
You never
bezel.
see that. Yeah,
No.
blue Bakelite bezel that matches the inner dial. You never see those
So
colors.
it's sensational on the wrist.
Right. How much does something like that run?
Hardly anything. It's like $68.50
I mean,
at
it's-
WANNABUYAWATCH.
It's a value buy. Right
Super
there,
condition.
You know? I don't think you get anything similar to that from such a historic brand such as JLC. That kind of configuration, that kind of condition, that kind of colorway for that money. You know.
And when you're standing in the Starbucks line, the guy in front of you and the guy behind you will not have one of these on.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
That references the story of the guy who came in here. He's standing in line at Starbucks, and the guy in front of him is wearing a sub. He's wearing a sub. The guy behind him wearing a sub. It's like, I got to get rid of my sub.
Somebody forwarded me a TikTok video this morning that was like a guy just sitting at a microphone. He says, the most important watch, you don't need to spend $1 million. You need to spend maximum $15,000. This is the only watch you'll ever need. What is it? It's the Rolex Submariner. And I was like, the Rolex Submariner, listen, there's a soft spot in my heart for the vintage models, you know, big crown, small crown, etc., red subs, whatnot. And they're the most popular watch in the world, you know, absolutely the most recognizable, most produced by Rolex, I guess, in their sports line. You have a tray of them here. And every collector needs to own a Submariner at some point. Absolutely do not disagree with that sentiment, which is the going sentiment. That being said, sometimes you got to be different. Sometimes you can't just.
And you
wear
just
a Submariner.
posted a fabulous one, a fabulous James Bond sub,
Right.
no crown guard. That's a beauty.
Right.
That's not.
No, I mean, and listen, I always recommend to people for their first vintage watch, they do something neo-vintage like you have here, like a 16610 with some nice patina, or a 16800.
16800s we're especially keen on.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. There's nothing wrong with those watches, but every once in a while, you know, if you've already gone down that road, you go for something like this for less money too.
Indeed.
For less money.
Indeed.
Beautiful watch. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kenneth. Okay. All right, I'll give you some stuff to pull out so I can take a look, but thank you for showing these watches on camera. As always, like I said before, if you're in the Los Angeles area, they're on Melrose Avenue.
Melrose Avenue, not Melrose Place.
Not Melrose Place, Melrose Avenue, West Hollywood. come to their store.
Look for the
Absolutely
Gruen
worth
clock.
it.
You saw the Gruen clock in the video. Look for the Gruen clock. Forget the address. Just look for the clock. We go where the clock goes.
Thank you, brother. After we left Ken's office in West Hollywood, we got to sit down with a dear friend of mine, the legendary artist and legendary watch collector, Mr. Wes Lang. Got to show him some great watches and catch up. Let's take a look. So Wes and I are here today because we are starting a new column for Revolution Magazine, and we are waiting for our dear friend Stephen Pulverin to arrive. Quickly, before Stephen gets here, talk about a few watches.
Let's see some stuff. What did you bring?
I brought to show somebody else, a mutual friend of ours, so to speak, a gold 6263, because he has got the bug for vintage Daytonas. You used to own a gold 6263.
I did. I got it from Yasek.
How long ago?
Several years ago, and then I moved out of it. I couldn't. It wasn't the right one for me, but I regret it.
Okay.
I do regret it.
So it wasn't the right one for you because of like condition, or just
no, it was immaculate. I want a different dial.
Yeah,
I wanted the
champagne
black
dial.
dial.
Ah, that's what it is.
So let me see this black dial.
This is a black dial. This one's 14 karat, so presumably made for the American market, although not necessarily.
Yeah, what is the story there?
So mostly because of import restrictions, a lot of the gold watches from that era imported into the United States were 14 karat, but also other countries as well, so it really just depends. 14 karat are technically rarer than their 18 karat counterparts, but surprisingly in the marketplace, people don't really care. They prefer 18 karat. I know Asian markets, they all want 18 karat. They don't really want 14 karat. I guess it's just because they think the gold isn't as pure. Yeah, exactly.
It has a much different tone to it, but I almost like it more.
It's funny you say that. I prefer 14 karat gold watches. Why? Because they look rose and they tarnish so much more than the 18 karat ones.
It's really beautiful.
So they get a beautiful rosy patina.
And we got a steel one too.
We got steel one on my wrist. We got a steel one there. That one's really cool though because it was made for the Peruvian Air Force. So if you look on the back, it is engraved and it was issued to the Peruvian Air Force. And surprisingly, a lot of those watches, since Rolex didn't do a lot of issued stuff, you know, they're talking military subs, Peruvian Air Force, Comex, although that wasn't a government organization. There's not a lot out there that Rolex did. But surprisingly, with the FAP watches, Peruvian Air Force watches, the interesting part is that not a lot of collectors wanted that on the back of their watch for some reason. And a lot of them were polished off. You'll see that because on those watches, one of the ways you validate them is that you check to see that the serial between the lugs matches inside the case back. So if you get a Daytona or a red sub or something like that that has a number inside the back where it normally shouldn't, it was most likely a Peruvian Air Force watch.
No way. That's amazing. Yeah, this thing is gorgeous. Why wouldn't people want it?
We're talking like 20 years ago kind of thing.
Right.
You know?
Much
now,
different time.
No one would ever do that. Like, you're killing a lot of value.
Time.
You know?
Yeah. What's something like that go for?
So we just listed on the website for 125. So it's a small premium above. If that didn't have FAP, we'd probably list it around 100, 105 kind of thing.
Right.
I figured your favorite would probably be, and I saw you looking at it earlier though, was the Patek Philippe Calatrava Reference 96. Wes, to his credit, something I respect about him very deeply as a collector is that he truly wears and buys what he loves. And a lot of his watches are much smaller, as he calls them, old man watches that he gravitates towards.
Yeah.
And doesn't really care like what's hot now, what's popular, like.
I mean, I've had a lot of that stuff, and it's got its merits.
Right. What's your favorite watch in your collection?
Probably my favorite watch I have is the Patek 130, which is a very small chronograph.
Right.
Not much bigger than this.
I thought you were going to say your perpetual.
No, I'd say that's my favorite. That's the watch that gives me the feels when I look at it.
And that's a small 33 millimeter chronograph, you know?
Yes.
And you're a big guy.
And I love chronograph is my favorite function of a watch. I really use them. But this is fantastic. I was reading about these the other day, and I was interested to hear that the term Calatrava didn't come about until the 80s.
Really?
Yeah. So this was not called a Calatrava. What year was this watch?
Watch is from the 40s.
Yeah.
50s, excuse me.
50s, yeah, it's a short signature. Yeah, that was like some invented term in the 80s. And this was like the longest running watch they ever made, right?
Yep.
Like decades and decades and decades. There's so many of these, predominantly yellow.
Predominantly yellow. They made steel, they made rose, obviously.
It is, I mean, the bracelet's too small and it's got this chain on it, so I can't try it on.
For sure not original to the watch.
Yeah, definitely not.
Like that out of South
But
America.
I want to try it on so badly, and that's the first one of these I've ever held in my hand.
Chain, go for it.
No, I'm not going to do that. It's too.
I
mean,
actually do need
it's
to have a
unbelievable.
jeweler break it off.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so small, but it just has such an incredible. I mean, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. I really like them, but there's like,
those wear surprisingly well
it comes
for the
off.
size.
Like this watch, you feel this watch. I look at this watch. This watch looks cool as shit.
Right.
So does this. They just look cool.
But
this has like an otherworldly feeling to it.
it's a bygone era kind of watch.
Yeah.
It's more of a historic watch, in my opinion.
And then this thing I did see on your website. I saw this on there, and the dial on this is just
that watch is stunning, beautiful tropical gilt.
Magnificent. What year is this from?
65.
You sold it.
Yeah, like 20 minutes ago. The
The
watch.
very special watch.
Yeah.
This has the feeling that this has. Got that aura to it.
That's the best era of Rolex sports watches. It's the gilt era from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Have you ever got into Hoyer, vintage Hoyer?
I have one. I bought the same watch that James Garner had. You know, he had one with his name on it.
That watch came to auction recently, I think.
It did.
A couple years ago.
So I bought one, and as a kid, I grew up watching the Rockford Files with my dad.
Okay.
It was our thing. So I read an article many years ago about James Garner's watch, and he had his name on the dial of it.
Right.
And I just was like, oh man, this is the coolest thing ever. So I hit up a friend who knew a lot about Heuer specifically, and I was like, hey, I need a really good version of this reference form. And he found it, and it was, you know, this was years ago, so it was very affordable, and
Right.
and I found somebody to put my name on the dial in the exact same font.
That's great.
So that's one of the special watches I have
Yeah,
for
and
me. I actually have it like hanging on the wall in my closet, so I look at it every single
That's
day.
awesome.
It's just one of those things like just for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because like a lot of people will be like, oh my God, you ruined an original watch. Like, but you know what?
No.
It's your property.
It's my
and
watch.
Now it's become sentimental, and it's something that, you know, becomes special to you, and I'm sure it'll get passed down to Otto at some point.
Yeah.
You know, so it becomes a life of its own. You know, not every watch has to remain pristine, original, perfect.
This
you know?
has signature on it as well,
It
huh?
does. It's co-signed. It was retailed by Bayer, retailer out of.
What year is this thing from?
It's from 60s, late 60s. Dado, 45.
Wow.
Yeah, and Hoyer like had its moment in the sun several years ago. Was all the rage. Market went crazy, and then it cooled off, and it's been very.
What caused
steady
it to
for a
go
while.
crazy?
It's a long discussion. I have my reasons. Collectors started gravitating towards
Right.
it, you know, and there was a lot of interest, and forums were very active. And there's a lot of great stuff there. They made a lot of really great watches. There's
Yeah,
there's
they
a
did.
great history there.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a lot of collectors and dealers trying to prop up these like random brands like Ebel, you know.
Yes.
And for me, that makes no sense.
No.
At least with Hoyer, there's a really rich history with watchmaking, with motorsports.
Yeah,
They
this
have
motorsports crossover is
a
incredible.
wide line of models that they produced, you know, so there's something for people to collect. When you look at these smaller brands and you try to discover these like uncovered gems, there needs to be enough supply out there so that if like you, Wes Lang, read a story about Ebel and you're like, oh, okay, I want to get into that, like there's none available because no one
Yeah.
really cared about them. They were tossed away, you know.
Yeah.
But at least with Hoyer, like they're out there because they produced a lot and there's
Yeah.
a real collector circle for them.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
there's all kinds of different variants of dials, and there's like a whole rabbit hole you can go down.
Exactly.
Just in line with Rolex and everything else.
Right.
So that's the second best watch you have on the table. This is number one.
Number one. I knew that was going to be your favorite. Okay, well, let's go do our revolution. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah,
Can
so
we
we're
at least,
starting
like,
a revolution column. We're going to be chatting, picking a watch or a watchmaker, chatting about what they do and what we feel from looking at them, and we'll see what happens.
I'm excited.
I don't know. Love you, buddy.
Me too. Hope you guys enjoyed this part one of our Los Angeles trip. Next week, we're going to be getting into the actual pop-up that we hosted. I hope you guys can stick around and watch it with us. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Anything you can help us do to grow the channel. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks. Bye.